welcome to our podcast where we help you improve your English. I'm Emily.
And I'm Jake. Today, we're diving into a fun topic that lots of people debate about New York versus Los Angeles.
That's right. We'll compare what it's like to live in these two famous cities.
We'll talk about the differences in weather, lifestyle, food, and more. Plus, we'll teach you some useful English expressions and grammar points along the way.
Okay, Jake, let's get into it. Just so everyone knows, I'm definitely on Team New York.
And I'm all about LA. East Coast versus West Coast. It's a classic battle.
Totally. Let's start with the weather. I'll admit, LA has great weather. It's sunny almost every day.
Yep, that's one of the biggest pros of living in Los Angeles. The sunshine and mild temperatures are perfect for outdoor activities all year round.
But for me, New York has something special. I love the four seasons. There's something magical about the crisp air in autumn, the snow in winter, and all the cherry blossoms in spring.
I get it, but I'm not a fan of snow. In LA, I can go to the beach in December while you're freezing in New York.
Fair point. But let's talk about transportation. In New York, you don't need a car. You can get anywhere using the subway or just walking. It's super convenient.
True, but the subway can get really crowded. People are often packed like sardines. That means it's so full that everyone is squished together like sardines in a can.
Good point. That's a great expression to learn, listeners. You can say packed like sardines when something is really crowded, like a subway train or a bus.
In LA, I have my car. Sure, there's traffic, but I have the freedom to go wherever I want, whenever I want.
Yeah, but traffic in LA can be so stressful. At least in New York, I can relax and read a book on the subway.
That's true. But hey, we should also talk about food. New York has amazing pizza, bagels, and food from all over the world.
Absolutely, you can find almost any type of cuisine in New York. But I have to say, tacos in LA are unbeatable.
All right, let's use this topic to introduce an expression. Pros and cons. This means the advantages and disadvantages of something.
So, the pros of New York: great public transportation, diverse food, and lots of cultural activities. But the cons? It's crowded and expensive.
And for LA, the pros are definitely the weather, outdoor activities, and relaxed lifestyle. But the cons are the traffic and the need for a car.
Okay, Jake, let's teach our listeners some more expressions and grammar points. Ready?
I'm ready. Let's start with to take something for granted. This means you don't appreciate something because it's always there.
For example, people in LA take the sunshine for granted. They don't realize how lucky they are until they visit a rainy place.
And in New York, sometimes we take the subway for granted. Until there's a train delay, of course.
Listeners, try using this expression. For example, I took having weekends off for granted until I started working on Saturdays.
Now, let's revisit the phrase, packed like sardines, that we mentioned earlier. This is great for describing crowded spaces.
Right. For example, during rush hour, the subway is packed like sardines.
Or, the concert was so crowded that we were packed like sardines near the stage.
Finally, let's talk about a structure that's great for giving advice. If I were you.
For example, if I were you, I'd choose LA for the sunshine.
And I'd say, if I were you, I'd pick New York for the culture.
Listeners, try using this in your own conversations. For example, if I were you, I'd study English every day.
Let's put everything together with a practice dialogue. Imagine two friends discussing which city to move to.
I'm torn between New York and LA. What do you think?
It depends on what you're looking for. New York has an incredible vibe, but it's definitely more fast-paced.
That's true. I do love the energy there, but LA's weather is hard to beat.
No doubt about that, but you might end up missing the changing seasons.
Good point. I just feel like LA would be more laid back.
It is, but sometimes the slower pace can feel isolating. New York, on the other hand, always feels alive, even late at night.
Yeah, but I'm not a fan of the cold winters. That's a big drawback for me.
Understandable. Still, there's something magical about a snowy New York evening. Plus, the city has so much diversity and culture.
It's so tough to decide. What would you do in my shoes?
If I were you, I'd visit both for an extended time. Really experience the day-to-day life before making a decision.
That's a great idea. Thanks for the advice.
Let's take a closer look at some of the key expressions that came up.
First, we have torn between. This means you're having a hard time deciding between two options. For example, I'm torn between pizza and pasta for dinner means you can't choose whether to have pizza or pasta.
That's right. In the conversation, this phrase was used to describe being undecided between New York and LA.
Next, we heard the expression hard to beat.
Yes, this phrase means something is so good that it's difficult to find anything better. For example, the view from the top of the mountain is hard to beat means the mountain view is amazing and tough to surpass.
In the conversation, this was used to describe LA's weather because it's pretty much unbeatable.
And then we had big drawback. This refers to a major disadvantage or a downside.
For example, the big drawback of living far from the city is the long commute, means a major downside of living far away is the travel time. In the conversation, New York's cold winters were mentioned as a big drawback.
So we've covered torn between, hard to beat, big drawback. Now, listen to the conversation again and see how these expressions were used in context.
I'm torn between New York and LA. What do you think?
It depends on what you're looking for. New York has an incredible vibe, but it's definitely more fast-paced.
That's true. I do love the energy there, but LA's weather is hard to beat.
No doubt about that, but you might end up missing the changing seasons.
Good point. I just feel like LA would be more laid back.
It is, but sometimes the slower pace can feel isolating. New York, on the other hand, always feels alive, even late at night.
Yeah, but I'm not a fan of the cold winters. That's a big drawback for me.
Understandable. Still, there's something magical about a snowy New York evening. Plus, the city has so much diversity and culture.
It's so tough to decide. What would you do in my shoes?
If I were you, I'd visit both for an extended time. Really experience the day-to-day life before making a decision.
That's a great idea. Thanks for the advice.
That's a wrap on today's episode about New York versus LA. I think it's clear that each city has its own charm. It really depends on what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And remember, everyone, to practice the expressions we talked about today.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.